All right, Larry Krueger here at Levi Stadium for the Pig in a Pickle Krug Show as we're here down at Levi Stadium for 49er training camp. Today was training camp practice number 9, day number 9 of training camp. Of course, we're brought to you by Pig in a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week in both spots from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. Go say hi to Damon and Mary. Get some brisket chili. Tell them that Larry Krueger sent you. All right. We're down here at training camp, and Niners just wrapped up a very long practice. And we expected this one to be long. Why? Because if you look at the way the Niners have been doing it, they go light practice and then usually a heavy practice. And if you looked at the way the practices had gone, Friday was a light practice. Thursday was an off day. Wednesday was also kind of a light practice. So we expected today, the 9th day of 49er training camp, to be a heavy practice. And sure enough, it was. It was 13 periods. They worked on a bunch of different things. All right, first let's start off with, I got a kind of an up-close look at the one-on-one O-line, D-line drills, and there were some really good battles. As far as who were the winners, Robert Beal Jr. had a rep where he beat Saubert, the tight end, pretty bad for a sack. Evan Anderson had an impressive bull rush of the guard. I forget which guard it was. Yetur Gross-Matos looks phenomenal in some of these one-on-one drills. He had a phenomenal 2 or 3 reps in the one-on-ones. Colton McKivitz had a one-on-one rep against Leonard Floyd where he stonewalled Floyd. That was a good rep for McKivitz. Jordan Elliott had a bull rush of Dominic Pooney where he got to the quarterback and he just got underneath Pooney's pads and just basically drove him towards the quarterback. And then Leonard Floyd did leave the drill, the one-on-one drill, which looked to be maybe a calf pull. He went down to the ground, but he did return to the drill. So obviously it was just a minor deal. As far as who stood out in practice today, Jalen Mahoney, the rookie from Vanderbilt, had an interception today. I thought that was good to see. We did see a little bit of a brawl. Elijah Turner on a pass play to Jordan Mason, JP Mason, pushed Mason down from behind on the sideline, and Mason got up and just slugged him, just took a shot at him. And yet we talked to Mason after practice, and he said, hey, man, it's camp, it's field stuff. It was like, he's like, I could go up to Elijah Turner in the locker room. We're cool. Everything's fine. But it was just a little on-field fisticuffs between Turner and Mason, which you're going to see in training camp in these long padded practices in the heat of the July or August sun. People get, short with each other, and all of a sudden you get annoyed and set off. And anyway, Turner pushed Mason down. Mason jumped up and rocked Turner, and they threw some blows for a minute, and that was pretty much the extent of it. As far as Brock Purdy, I think, we're seeing the good and the bad here. He had a great deep ball to Chris Conley. He had a phenomenal deep ball to Deebo Samuel for a touchdown against Demo Lenore. Purdy had a beautiful ball to Ricky Pearsall. He had a nice ball to Kittle. I thought Purdy's best pass of the day was a ball where he had some rush on him and he had to move in the pocket, and then he just flipped it out to Deebo, but he flipped it out to him in the flat while he was covered over a defender on the move and just dropped a perfect dime right on him. It was the kind of play that you just go, wow. Man, that's really what makes Brock Purdy. So, you think Purdy hitting Deebo in the flat would not be the play of the day, but I thought in a lot of ways it was from Brock. It was just a perfect pass. There was a lot of things that were in the way, and he just dropped it. Just kind of layered it right over the defender, put it right on Deebo's hands, right away from the defender where the defender couldn't do anything. He had to move in the pocket to create the space. It was about 5 different positive points there from Brock Purdy on the dime in the flat to Deebo Samuel. JP Mason had several nice runs, and JP Mason is, having easily his best camp. And then we talked to JP Mason at the end of the practice, and I asked him, I said, was it frustrating for you the last couple of years to, be running the ball well and look good, but not getting any run, not getting any PT, not getting any playing time? And I said, is it frustrating to you? And he was very candid, and he said that that initially he really did not hit it off with Bobby T. That Bobby T was asking him to do things and he wasn't doing it. That him and Bobby T didn't see eye to eye. That he wasn't Bobby T's kind of guy, so he didn't play. And he basically, said, hey, we're cool now, and now I do what he says, and I understand it's his way or the highway kind of a thing. And I think that's what we're seeing here is that JP Mason, and he basically just told us why he didn't play the last couple of years. He didn't play because he didn't do all the things that Bobby T wanted him to do. And Bobby T is the gatekeeper to carries. And if you don't do what Bobby T wants, you don't see the field. He didn't do what Bobby T wanted. He didn't see the field. This year he's doing more of what Bobby T wants, and he's seeing the field. So I would expect JP Mason to be a significant player this year for the 49ers. I'll say this, if you put JP Mason on the Cowboys today, he's their number one running back. He is their starting running back, and he's like the talk of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But here on this team, he's just another back on one of the best backfields in the entire league. So he was great today, and he's been great this entire camp. And then he told us afterwards, why he's having a bust-out camp. He's having a bust-out camp because him and Bobby T are now on the same page, and he expects to get more run. And Shanahan sounds like he expects J.P. Mason to get more run. So Mitchell's still a hell of a back. McCaffrey's still an MVP-type player. Garendo's got huge talent. Schrader looks good. There's all kinds of depth here, but expect to see a lot of J.P. Mason this year. Leonard Floyd had a sack of Purdy in the practice today. Tatum Bethune had a really nice play or two against the run. He's starting to kind of show himself as camp has gone on. He's made more and more plays. Ji'Ayir Brown had an interception of Brock Purdy. It was a really nice play by Ji'Ayir. Dobbs had a deep ball touchdown to Danny Gray, who, Danny Gray is looking like a totally different player in this camp. He's just so intent on salvaging an NFL career. At this point, he's a bust. He's a third-round pick at SMU who didn't make it in the league. And he knows it. And so he appears to be kind of turning it up a little bit. And Dobbs hit him on a deep ball today for a touchdown. That was fantastic. Now, we've also seen throughout practice, Danny using that machine to kind of that machine that kind of vibrates and he's been pushing it on his quads and his hamstring. So I think he's battling some soft tissue issues right now, but he's trying to battle through it because he knows it's do or die time for him. This is a make it or break it camp for Danny Gray, and he knows it. So is he battling a hamstring? Is he battling a quad? It looks like he is, but he's out there trying to make plays, and he had a great touchdown catch today from Dobbs. Malik Turner, who's wearing number 0, the wide receiver, went down in this practice. He had a hamstring injury. Cam Latu, who badly needs to get out on the field and show what he can do, was not practicing today, probably due to an injury. Cody Schrader had another day where he had, more than a couple nice plays. He had a really nice catch and run. Dobbs hit him in the flat one time, and he made a guy miss and rumbled down the sidelines. So I think Cody Schrader is starting to look good. And then a couple more thoughts before we wrap it here. One, today is the Hall of Fame induction ceremony in Canton, Ohio, and congratulations to Patrick Willis for being inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He's very deserving. He was one of the greatest linebackers of his era. I'm glad that the injuries that he had that shortened his career did not keep him out of Canton. But when I think today of, the Hall of Fame and the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and I love the speeches, the Pro Football Hall of Fame is one of my favorite days of the year covering the NFL because, you get to hear the stories of these gladiators basically and how they went from, a little boy with a dream to an NFL Hall of Famer who made a dramatic impact on the sport and the team that he played on. And it just always comes back to Roger Craig belongs in the Hall of Fame. And I don't know what it's going to take to get him there, man. And it's just so frustrating. He's a 3-time Super Bowl champion. He was the AP Offensive Player of the Year in 1988. He was a 2-time All-Pro. He played 8 seasons in San Francisco. He scored 66 touchdowns, 50 rushing, and I think 15 or 16 receiving. First player in the history of pro football to go for 1,000 yards rushing and 1,000 yards receiving in the same season. He was Marshall Faulk before Marshall Faulk. He was Christian McCaffrey before Christian McCaffrey. I mean, you could make an argument that the greatest Niner team of all time was the 84 Niners. Roger Craig scored, he was Montana got the MVP, but Craig scored 3 touchdowns in that Super Bowl. He was the best player on the field. When the Niners played, the greatest Niner team of all time, you could argue, was 84. And they beat the Dolphins, and they beat them pretty good. And you could argue that Roger Craig was the best player on the field that day, and he's not in the Hall of Fame. He's the only running back from the all-decade team of the 80s, 90s, or 2000s who's not in the Hall of Fame. The guy belongs in the Hall of Fame. I'll say this one more time, and I've said it 20 times, so forgive me if you've heard it before. But Roger Craig's numbers were suppressed by the fact that he played with Jerry Rice. And Jerry Rice was the greatest statistical entity the NFL's ever seen. Jerry Rice put receiving records in areas that players today don't even approach, and it's much more of a passing era with all the rule changes have favored offense, and yet still guys don't approach Jerry's records. Jerry was the greatest statistical offensive player in the history of pro football. And because Roger Craig played with him, his numbers are suppressed by playing with Jerry. So I could say the same thing about Ricky Waters. I could say the same thing about Brent Jones. I could say the same thing about John Taylor. I could say the same thing about a number of guys who played with Jerry Rice. Jerry's numbers are in the stratosphere. And Jerry was motivated by insecurity, and his team knew it, and his coaches knew it, and so they kept feeding him the ball. Roger was a total team guy who was going to be good either way. And I just think that his easygoing, I'm going to be a pro's pro no matter how many balls you hand me, no matter how many passes you throw to me, just made him the easy guy to not use as you were trying to fuel Jerry Rice and gas up Jerry Rice. And I'm not saying, there's nothing nefarious went on here. The 49er coaches fed the greatest receiver of all time, and they fed him the ball religiously. But Jerry's statistical dominance, the guy whose stats are suppressed due to Jerry's statistical dominance, are mostly Roger Craig. And so when people sit there and say Roger Craig doesn't belong in the Hall of Fame and they start talking stats, guys, there's only one football. How many times have we covered football games and we go into the locker room and there's a 200-yard receiver? There's hardly ever a 200-yard runner in the same game where there's a 200-yard receiver. Why? Because there's only one football. If you have somebody rush for 200 yards in a game, guess what? You're not going to have a 200-yard receiver. If you have somebody catch 200 yards receiving, most likely you're not going to have a 200-yard rusher. Roger Craig's numbers were suppressed because of Jerry, and he's just too classy of a guy to say it. If Bill Walsh were alive today, Roger would already be in the Hall of Fame. Bill's passing early, at an early age. Roger lost an advocate for the Hall of Fame. Roger Craig is a Hall of Famer, and he belongs in the Hall of Fame. I mean, come on, guys, this is ridiculous. Andre Reed is in the Hall of Fame, but Roger Craig is not? Roger Craig won Super Bowls. Andre Reed lost Super Bowls. I mean, it's sad. At this point, it's sad, it's unfortunate, and it has to come to an end. Roger Craig needs to be in the Hall of Fame. I'll just leave it at that. And then, the other thing I thought was kind of interesting, we talked to Colton McKivitz after practice, and I asked Colton, I said, Colton, does it bother you that your teammates think you're a hell of a player, that your coaches think you're a hell of a player, but that you get ragged by the media and ragged by fans? And in a very candid moment, he said, you know what? Absolutely. It used to bother me, and I've let it bother me. And I'm a human being, and it never is good to, hear people ragging you and saying negative stuff about you. But he's learned to compartmentalize the whole thing and to understand that it doesn't really matter what, people that are maybe not as informed as his teammates or as his coaches, the opinion that they have of him. You can tell it bothers him because he's a sensitive guy. And he admitted that it bothered him, but he's found a way to kind of get beyond that. And he's having a phenomenal camp, and he's a fixture at right tackle. And I think he's a pretty good offensive lineman, to be honest. I think he's been ragged unfairly and unjustly by Niner fans and some people in the media. All right, that's going to do it for our recap. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of The Krug Show. Thanks to Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles for sponsoring this video. And thanks to all of you guys for supporting The Krug Show on YouTube.